Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Along with many other content creators, I was sent a whole host of plastic for the Grand Cathay release, and I'm super appreciative to Games Workshop for sending me all those miniatures and the rules. You may have already seen my Arcane Journal review and my review of the match play guide as well, and there's a whole host of hobby related videos to come now, including a big army paint video. But today I'm going to be looking at the Cathayan Sentinel and getting some paint on it.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description. Now, we've seen the stunning studio paint jobs in the terracotta scheme and also, I believe, a jade scheme as well. I'm doing something slightly different for my army. I want an Obsidian Sentinel, but a little bit more about that in a moment. I wanted to make a quick note on the miniature itself and primarily the assembly of the miniature itself. And there's been quite a lot of talk on the internet, and Andy over on Mediocre Hobbies has done his own painting tutorial, which is fantastic. By the way, you should definitely check it out. And you've probably already seen it anyway. He also talks quite a lot in the first sort of half, maybe 2/3 of the video about how it was to build the miniature. And I'll be honest with you, I had a similar experience to him. What I don't want that to do is take away from the sculpt itself. It's absolutely beautiful miniature, and once it's built, it's stunning. I absolutely love it, and I wouldn't give up the miniature just because of the experience I had building it. I've built many miniatures over the years as a wargamer and working within the hobby as well. I build and paint miniatures for a living, that's it. So I've built a lot, and I've built an awful lot worse than this, including many Forge World resin tanks and things from earlier eras where you had to saw off all kinds of stuff. So I want to put it in perspective, but it isn't an easy build at all. I think some of that is down to the way it's designed in the layers. It's clever, but also makes it a little bit tricky for some of the smaller parts. I think it could be really improved by a full colour guide where it shows you which parts definitely fit together, where the glue goes and how they fit in, because some of the sort of the Mayfield socket points are so subtle. As soon as you add some glue to them, they slip around, and I definitely had some issues, and it wasn't built to the standard I would normally want to build to. I'm just glad it's not just me that has experienced that. I thought I was having a bad day, but I got there in the end. As you can see, he's fully built and primed here. There is a little gap at the back, and that again is down to not knowing quite how to glue certain bits together. So do take your time, take care, and you will be all right with it. It's still a great miniature. So back to the Obsidian. So Obsidian is this lovely, beautiful black rock, quite often seen shiny, and I want shiny elements on there, but also that would be a little bit too bland, I think, and I really wanted to get some other textures and values in there as well. And if you search Obsidian, you get loads of reference pictures, as you can see here, in different states. Less polished, the older rock on the outside. I don't know much about rocks, so sorry about that. My geology is a 0. But you'll see there's browns and there's dusty areas, and I want to kind of encompass all of that into the miniature, and I think it would look really interesting. At least that was my idea. You can judge me on the end whether I've managed to bring some of these elements into the finished miniature. So this is Death, Reaper and Dungeon Stone Grey from Two Thin Coats. They convert very well with Citadel paints if you're a Citadel user. So head over to the Transatlantic Games website. I believe also on the Duncan Rhodes Academy page will have them as well. And there's conversion charts, and they convert very well, especially their waves 1 and 2 with the Citadel ranges. They're almost exact copies of some of them. As most paint ranges are these days, there's only so many different colours, but they're really good. They go great with the hairy brush and great with the airbrush as well, which you can see I'm using here. Now, the reason I'm using an airbrush is because I want to build light subtly into the miniature, and it's almost a Zenithal what I'm doing here, and I'll start most of my miniatures like this, but here it is the base colour as well, and I'm working from top down angles from the sides a little bit, trying to hit areas where the light would reflect off that obsidian if it was shiny, but obviously the light's going to reflect off any of these surfaces anyway, so I'm leaving loads of that black in there as well, building it up slowly, moving to the lighter tone and just smaller amounts there. And again, it's not going to look all shiny at the moment, but it's kind of giving me me a base layer to work from of 3 different shades on there, from a darker black all the way through to a little bit of lighter grey at the top. Obviously I'm leaving loads of that black in there because Obsidian is black and I want it to look dark and shiny. My biggest fear at the moment while I'm doing this is this a suitable colour to choose to make a tutorial out of, because it's the kind of colour that kind of looks better in the hand rather than photographing or trying to make a video out of. It's definitely more striking to do a jade one or something like that, but what the hell, I wanted this version in my army, so I'm going to paint it to match the rules that I want to play with it. Next up is lots of dry brushing, and I've got the modern tools for the job here. The brush is from Amazon, but the little sponge here, the dampening sponge, and the dry palette are from Knott's Hobbies. There's a link in my video description if you want to support a very small UK business there. You get 10% off following that link as well. But I'm just moistened the end of my soft dry brush a little bit so we don't get that dry streaky effect when you do your dry brushing. And I'm using a little bit of Carcharodon grey here, again from the Tooth and Coats range. I want something not quite white but very, very light grey. I'm going to focus here to really pick up a lot of that detail on the edges, and then we're going to do loads more glazing back afterwards. But it will look pretty cool just after this, but won't have all that shine and all those extra values until we have those glazes. So the first few strokes are a little bit tentative. I always like to be careful just because I missed some paint on the brush that's too heavy and it goes straight on the miniature. You saw me take the excess off and test it on my hand first, but I'm just being a little bit careful. Choosing from one angle at the moment to start with as well, just focusing where the edges are at the top, where the light would hit right at the top. And then as I move into it and get more confident that the right amount of paint is on the brush, I start to do a little bit more circular motions, hitting more of the miniature. I'm really just trying to catch edges here. I don't want to hit those flat surfaces too much at all. Just catching where the light would hit, where those jagged areas of the stone would be. And this miniature is just absolutely packed with detail. There's detail everywhere. It's just screaming out to be dry brushed like this, and it'll end up looking pretty cool. You could stop after this dry brush stage, no problem at all if you wanted to. So here we have Pterodon turquoise, Cygor brown, Shaiish purple, and Black Legion contrast paints, all going to go on my wet palette and make a right old mess on there, but all thinned with water, at least 50-50, maybe even more. And I'm glazing these on over the miniature now, over most of the miniature. Now, if you've watched my wood tutorials before on the channel, I do lots of wet blending on the miniatures using contrast paints that I've turned into glazes and mixed them over a under-painted zenithal miniature with loads and loads of dry brushing, and you get all these lovely effects that are really cool. And it's just fun and really, really easy. Stick some music on and slap paint on a miniature without being too stressful about where stuff goes. And I'm literally taking a little bit of a certain colour, applying it to an area, going back, getting another, and then wet blending them on the miniature and working my way around. And what you really find, or what I find, is that you get really, really nice mixed values. Not only do they blend perfectly together that way and you don't have any streaks, you get all these different colours and elements. And when you're looking at natural things like wood or rocks or things, it's very easy just to think brown or grey or black in this case, but you really look at something in detail, take a picture of it, look how the light's shining off it, all the different sort of elements that brings out, and you see all kinds of different colours in there. And you'll have seen some of those in those examples of Obsidian. There's elements of greens and blues and purples, and that's why I've used some of those colours in this selection here. So that's my theory, that's my idea, that working from that black base with the grey layers on the airbrush and then the dry brushing, I can now tone down all that dry brushing now and start to put on this kind of mixed layer over the whole miniature where you've got little elements of purples and blues and greens and browns all into there. And then we'll go back and do a little bit more dry brushing again in a minute. But hopefully you can get your head around what sort of process I'm trying to do here and what I'm trying to achieve. Now this is him when it's dry. It's really hard to photograph black, but hopefully you can see some of the different tonal qualities in there. But we need to give it a boost now and make some of that brighter. So we're back to dry brushing and the same grey that we used a little bit earlier on. A little bit less this time, much, much lighter. And I don't want to go back in just as heavy as I did before, but I really want to touch on and really gently lighten up some of those top areas, just so that I can go back and do a lighter glaze of some of the brighter colours, not the black. And this is how we're building up the values and those textures and those layers. So this time we have the Pterodon turquoise again and the shyish purple, but this time we're adding a bit of Gorgunter fur as the brown mix, because again that's just slightly warmer tone, and we saw some of that brown dusty effect from those images earlier on. We've added that new dry brush, and then this glaze is very much focused on recovering that. These are a little bit thinner as well, probably 2 parts water to 1 part contrast paint, and I've not got very much on my brush. I'm trying not to make it like a wash. I'm trying to glaze it more over the top of that dry brushed areas and add a filter, really. It just enhances some of those colours I was talking about, those blues and those greens, those purples, and the brown of course as well, so it doesn't just look plain black. Now as soon as I take a picture of it, it's going to look black from a distance. Like I said, it's going to be one of those miniatures that's going to look better in the hand, I think, but it's a process that I think is working, and hopefully you can understand what I'm trying to achieve. So this is Contrast Skeleton Horde, and I'm just applying that straight over these few little bits of kind of ties or parchmenty bits that seem to be tied on. And again, they've all been covered in that dry brushing, so I'm just going with one even coat all over, and with a few effects later on. That's all I'm going to do for it. I think that looks absolutely fine. And then at this stage, I'm using Contrast Warp Lightning just to go over all of these gems that are on the miniature. Again, because I've been dry brushing, the detail is picked out on those quite nicely. I'm just doing a thin glaze on these, but it starts to add some green, and we'll be adding another green effect a little bit later on. Back to the Gorgunter fur, and this time I'm painting in a little bit of the rope or the cord that's holding those little ties on that we've just painted in the Contrast Skeleton Horde. Then it's 2 thin coats dry rust brown for a little highlight on that same area. Now for some golds, and we have Scale 75's Metal and Alchemy range, and we have Viking gold and Dwarven gold, and I've been using these golds throughout the rest of the army. So if you're watching this or seeing this video before the big army paint, which is a good chance because this one's coming out first, then you will see these colours again a little bit later on. It's only a handful of parts on this miniature that needs it. You've got a few little coins and little accoutrements tied to the ropes and things on the side. This is the Technical Paint Waystone Green, and I use these quite a lot. They're very much a time saver when you're army painting, and I'm just glazing them over the top of the gems here. They've already got that green on there, but this just kind of finishes them off and makes them look a little bit shiny. Could have gone with some gloss as well, and I'll be using some gloss varnish in a moment, but I wanted to use them on all of them, and some of them a little bit less detailed than the others, so it's a time-saving device for me. They will look lovely, and they do look lovely if you paint them a different way. If you start with greens and highlight up and do lots of thin edge highlighting on them, I want this thing to look dusty and rocky and dirty, so this kind of works out all right. And now I am using some gloss varnish, and I'm popping it in the airbrushing. Again, if you don't have an airbrush, you could brush paint this on, no problem at all. But what I'm doing is doing in patches. I am leaving some patches without any gloss varnish on. Again, I'm working a bit like I did when I did those first airbrush stages, Zenith-esque. I'm trying to put the top areas where the light hits a little bit, make them slightly glossy. When you apply gloss varnish for an airbrush like this anyway, it tends to be a little bit more satin than pure, super shiny high gloss, because you're atomizing just such small amounts of the varnish, so it's very, very thin. But what I'm doing here is just adding the interest, adding the elements of those shiny bits of obsidian as we saw them from those examples at the beginning of the video. And I want to kind of have that real mix between the shiny areas and also those really grim and dusty and dirty that look just like rock. While I'm waiting for that gloss to fully harden and set, I'm building up the base with texture paint, and all the remaining stages now are oil washes, enamel washes and weathering pigments, and I use the same ones on the base as well, so it makes sense that this is the next stage as it is. So I'm building this all up, and I start adding a few rocks to the base as well, so it's not completely flat and gets a little bit of extra interest on there. And once they're fully dry, this is AK wash for wood and some of their thinner, and I make up a 50-50 mix. I'm using this on a lot of my bases at the moment. I apply it straight over the rocks. They're a mix of plaster of Paris and white cat litter. Cat sand in the UK, that style of cat litter. It just sort of absorbs it and soaks it in. By the time I've added lots of weathering powders and oil washes and things on there, they look great. They look really, really sort of natural, without, again, painting and dry brushing and highlighting rocks and things and just slapping stuff on, and you get really, really nice, almost military modelling style realism effects there, which is just what I'm after. For the Sentinel itself, I'm using this ready mixed oil wash from Scale 75, and this is dark mud. I'm using an old brush for these, and I'm painting these in a bit like a pin wash into the recesses to start with, working from the feet up at the moment. And I'm going to go around the whole miniature, adding splashes of this oil wash into recesses, and when it dries, not only will it shade, it'll leave this sort of dirty dry brown residue in there, a bit reminiscent. Again, I will reflect back on those pictures at the start of the video of the rocks when they're looking more dusty and you've got some of those brown elements in the cracks and things, and this is what I'm trying to demonstrate and show as well by using this oil wash, and it just breaks up all that black that's there as well at the moment, and hopefully takes the eye away from something that's just black, and there's more areas for light to hit for when you photograph it and look at it, and just breaks it all up. But I am focusing, rather than the big flat areas, into the detail, and I continue to do that for all of this stage and through the next stage as well. Now this is Tooth & Coat's gloss varnish, but you could use any, and you remember earlier when I was airbrushing the gloss on, I said it will look quite subtle, almost satin, because I'm atomizing it, it's a thin layer. I want some areas to look like that really high gloss, and that's why I'm hand painting in just a couple of areas where the light would hit really shiny, as if it's worn away on the tops of the miniature, and leave a little bit more grim and dirty down the bottom parts. Now it looks really whitish as it goes on. It doesn't dry like that, it dries completely clear. But again, as I said, I'm just trying to pick out a couple of areas of more ultra shine on there. Again, it will cause havoc when I try to take pictures later on as the light reflects off it, but in hand you'll really be able to see the difference between the ultra shiny parts and those really matte sort of dusty parts of the Obsidian. Now onto some pigment. This is Dark Earth and Europe Earth from AK, and it's the pigment I'm using on the basing for this army, but also my most used basing pigment at the moment. And I did a little video about my basing theories and ideas and the kind of recipes that I use using these kind of things very recently. I may remember to pop a link into that now, I may not. But I'm brushing this into the miniature directly, which is a little bit odd, because normally you would maybe make a wash out of this using thinners, fix it afterwards using pigment fixer as well, but it will change and take away from the effect that I'm trying to achieve here. I want something a little bit more in the face than you get from a wash like that. So I'm brushing it directly in, but the difference is I'm brushing it directly into the detail, blowing the excess off, and then wiping it off the flat surface. So you're left with it just really ground in that detail. And could it come off? Yeah, if you get your miniature wet. I don't tend to do that with my gaming miniatures, so you want to be careful, but I do this with all of my basing, and as long as you're brushing it into the detail and not expecting it to stay on the flat surfaces, you're absolutely fine. And what I'm trying to achieve here, again, maybe for the final time, referencing back to those original pictures, looking at some of those cracks where that real sort of brown, earthy, dusty colour was on that Obsidian, and I'm brushing it straight in. You can see here I've wiped some of it off my fingers throughout, but I'm also using a cotton bud or Q-tip if you're from the States, and just wiping it away. And because there's a little bit of gloss on the miniature there as well, it just takes it off those flat surfaces. It just leaves with all that dusty effect right down on those cracks and crevices. I think, hope that we're starting to achieve that look between the shiny Obsidian and that real kind of rough rock, almost chalky, dusty parts of it as well. And we're into those final stages now. So I start with a lighter pigment on the base first, blend it out, brushing it in, and then I go in with that dark earth and blend it as well. Different pigments have different properties. I find these AK ones are a bit more like a kind of concealer makeup texture. It's a bit greasier and wants to stay on the surface a little bit more, which is really good when you want it to stay there and you're not adding a fixer on top afterwards. Some of them out there, the Vallejo ones, are much more dusty. They're fine for on the bases and things, but won't stay on the flatter surfaces quite as much. So these are very good for what I've been doing with them. Here, adding some Tufts. These are from Warpaint Figures, a really great company in the UK. I've got stuck using 2mm Tufts for a long time now, since I started painting in smaller scales, and I just use them for everything now. And then finishing off with a nice black rim to my base. And here's the finished miniature. I hope you can see it. I hope that the camera is picking up what I tried to achieve there. Like I've said all along, if I picked a grey granite one or a terracotta or a jade one, it'd be much easier to paint it and make it look striking, and people see what I'm trying to achieve. But again, black is notoriously hard to paint anyway in some ways, at least to make it look good. But hopefully what I've tried to do here with this paint job is coming out across on the screen, because I did have lots of fun. It's exactly what I set out to do, which is always good when I have an idea in my head of how something might work and a process I might do, and it comes off, that's good. I wanted it to be quick and easy. This really was quite a quick paint job, the quickest out of the whole army, out of all the different things. It's very straightforward. There's very little kind of detailed brush work. Most of it is applying effects and using the airbrush, which I find personally a lot quicker than doing some of those hand painting jobs on there. And it's really nice just to sort of crack on and have a go, and I think he's going to look pretty cool and stand out from the other brighter parts of the army. Lots of silver for the Jade warriors and lancers with green on there, and then the lantern and all the brighter creatures like the longbow and the artillery crews, which are also quite bright with their reds and whites and blues and things. So this will stand out in that sense, and I think it'll look really nice amongst the rest of the army. And then you'll have to look out for that in the upcoming army video when I talk about how I painted the bulk of the army, and you judge for yourselves how well he fits in with the rest of that. But lots of fun. Don't be put off purchasing the miniature because of all the stories of the hard build. It's not the easiest build, but you can build it, and once it's done, it is absolutely worth it, and quite cool rules as well. I think they're really, really well done. If you haven't checked out my Arcane Journal review, go and check it now.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's given you a bit of an idea how you may go about painting your Cathayan Sentinel. Obviously, I've picked one version of it. I'm sure a lot of people will be going for terracotta or jade, but this is what I wanted for my army. But I thought it would be a fun way of exploring how to paint that kind of semi-shiny, semi-dirty rock, and giving you some ideas about how I approached it. Obviously, you can approach it in your own ways, and there are lots of simpler ways of doing it as well, and not everyone will have an airbrush and all of that stuff that I've no doubt already talked about throughout the video ad nauseum. But I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. Hope you're excited about Cathay. If you watched to this point, I'm sure you are, or at least interested in the techniques and things. So let me know in the comments below what you think of the techniques I've used today, how you're going to paint your own Cathayan Sentinels, or what you're going to be including in your armies if you're not including a Cathayan Sentinel. If you have enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. It really helps the channel get more visibility and be seen by more people. If you'd like to support me even further, then Patreon really is the best way to do that. There's a link in the video description below. Plenty of different tiers to suit multiple needs, and the most basic tier is just £1 or $1, or around that mark depending on the tax in your region. But it really helps me out and helps me be able to keep making videos like this. Join the Discord as well, that's completely free, and check out all the other links in the video description, including the channel sponsor Counterattack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for lots more on Cathay, and I'll catch you soon.